The rhythmic clatter of horse hooves against the dusty Colorado trail stopped abruptly as Emma Collins clutched her side in pain, nearly toppling from her saddle. It was the third time that morning in the spring of 1874 that she'd been forced to halt her journey. The mysterious ailment that had driven her husband away now threatening to leave her stranded between nowhere and somewhere among the towering pines and sprawling meadows of the western frontier. Emma gritted her teeth against another wave of agony. 6 months ago, she'd been the picture of health, helping her husband Thomas run their small homestead outside Denver. Then the fevers came, followed by the weakness, the inexplicable pain that flared without warning. The local doctor had been baffled, offering little more than laudanum and grim expressions. Thomas had grown increasingly distant as her condition worsened, his patience wearing thin with a wife who could no longer manage her share of the work. "A man needs a woman who can pull her weight," he'd said one night, packing his bags. By morning, he was gone, headed to California with barely a backward glance, leaving Emma with nothing but a failing farm and dwindling hope. She'd sold what remained of their homestead for a fraction of its worth and set out for Willow Creek, where her late mother's sister lived. The journey should have taken 5 days on horseback, but Emma's weakened state had stretched it to 8, and she was still a day's ride from town. Straightening in her saddle, she patted her mare's neck. "Just a little longer, Penny," she murmured, ignoring the sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool spring air. She nudged the horse forward, determined to reach the next trading post before nightfall. The sun was low in the sky when Emma spotted smoke from a chimney rising above the trees. Relief flooded through her as the small trading post came into view, a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and a corral for horses. 2 men sat on the porch, their conversation dying as they watched her approach. Emma's vision swam as she attempted to dismount. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she would have collapsed in the dirt if not for the strong arms that suddenly caught her. "Whoa there, madam, I've got you." Through her haze, Emma registered a deep voice with a slight drawl. She looked up to find herself in the arms of a tall man with a weathered face, kind eyes, and the unmistakable attire of a cowboy, from his worn leather boots to the hat that had fallen to his back, suspended by a cord around his neck. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I'm not usually so clumsy." "Nothing to apologize for," he replied, helping her to a bench on the porch. "You look like you've had a rough go of it. Name's Xavier Blackwood, but most folks call me Zav." "Emma Collins," she said, wincing as another pain shot through her side. "You're ill," he observed, his brow furrowing with concern. The storekeeper emerged from inside, a grizzled man with spectacles perched on his nose. "She need a doctor, Blackwood?" "I'm fine," Emma insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Just tired from the journey." "I'm heading to Willow Creek to stay with my aunt." "Willow Creek's still a day's ride," Xavier said, studying her pale face, "and no place for a sick woman to be traveling alone." "I don't have much choice," Emma replied, a note of bitterness creeping into her voice. "My husband left when I got sick, said he didn't sign up to care for an invalid." The cowboy's expression hardened, something fierce and protective flashing in his eyes. "Then let me be the one who stays," he said softly, "at least until you reach your aunt safely." Emma stared at him, too surprised to respond. In her experience, strangers didn't offer help without expecting something in return, especially not to sickly women with nothing to offer. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Xavier shrugged, adjusting his leather vest. "My ma raised me to believe a man helps those in need, no questions asked. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I'm headed toward Willow Creek myself, got some business with the cattle buyer there." The storekeeper chuckled. "Blackwood here's the most honest cowhand in 3 territories, madam. If he says he'll see you safe to Willow Creek, you can bet your last dollar on it." Emma hesitated, weighing her options. Pride urged her to refuse, to prove she could make it on her own, but practicality and the pain radiating through her body won out. "I would be grateful for the company," she finally said. Xavier nodded. "Good, we'll stay here tonight and set out at first light." The storekeeper showed Emma to a small back room with a narrow bed. After a simple meal of beans and biscuits, she fell into an exhausted sleep, her dreams filled with her husband's retreating back and a stranger's promise to stay. Morning came with fog hanging low over the pines. Emma awoke feeling marginally better, though the persistent ache in her side remained. She found Xavier already up, tending to the horses and loading supplies onto his sturdy bay gelding. "Got some coffee brewing inside," he said when he noticed her watching. "And Mrs. Porter, the storekeeper's wife, packed us some food for the journey." "You didn't have to do that," Emma said, embarrassed at being treated like charity. Xavier's expression was kind but firm. "Neighbors help neighbors out here, Mrs. Collins. That's how we all survive." "Emma," she corrected him. "Please call me Emma and thank you." They set out as the fog began to lift, revealing a crisp blue sky. Xavier led the way, setting a gentle pace that wouldn't tax Emma's strength. He was a quiet man, she discovered, not given to idle chatter but observant and thoughtful. When they stopped to rest the horses by a clear stream, he helped her dismount without making her feel helpless, then busied himself gathering firewood while she stretched her aching limbs. "May I ask what happened?" Emma ventured as they sat by the small fire, sipping coffee from tin cups. "With your business in Willow Creek, I mean." Xavier considered her question, his gaze steady. "I've been working as a trail boss for the Diamond Bar Ranch these past 3 years. Owners sending me to negotiate with the railroad man in Willow Creek about getting better rates for shipping cattle east." "You must be trusted," Emma observed. He shrugged. "I'm fair, and I can do figures in my head faster than most men with paper and pencil. What about you?" "Your aunt in Willow Creek, has she been expecting you?" Emma stared into her coffee. "I sent a letter 2 weeks ago, but I don't know if it arrived. Aunt Martha is my mother's sister. I haven't seen her since I was a child, but she's the only family I have left now. And your illness?" Xavier asked gently. "If you don't mind my asking," Emma sighed. "The doctor in Denver couldn't say for certain. It started with fevers and weakness. Now there's pain too, mostly in my side. Some days are better than others." "And your husband just left." His voice had taken on an edge. "Thomas was never one for hardship," Emma said, surprising herself with the lack of emotion in her voice. "When I couldn't keep up with the work, he grew resentful, said he wasn't going to waste his life nursing a sick wife." Xavier's jaw tightened. Some men don't deserve the title. They fell silent, the crackle of the fire and distant bird calls the only sounds. Emma studied her companion surreptitiously. He was handsome in a rugged way, with sun-browned skin and laugh lines around his eyes. His hands were calloused from work, his movements efficient and purposeful. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel safer than she had in months. "We should get moving if we want to reach the Miller homestead by nightfall," Xavier said eventually, dousing the fire. "They're good folks who will put us up for the night." The day passed more pleasantly than Emma would have thought possible given her condition. Xavier pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his years working cattle drives across the West. He had a dry sense of humor that occasionally surprised a laugh from her, and an encyclopedic knowledge of the land and its wildlife. By late afternoon, Emma was flagging, the pain in her side increasingly difficult to ignore. Xavier noticed immediately when her posture slumped. "Not much farther," he assured her, guiding his horse closer to hers. "Can you hold on?" Emma nodded, though her face had gone pale. "I've endured worse." His expression softened. "I don't doubt it, but there's no prize for suffering in silence. We can stop if you need to." "No," she insisted. "I want to reach shelter before dark." The Miller homestead appeared just as the sun began to set, a well-kept farm with a 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the sounds of children's laughter carried on the evening air. Sarah Miller, a robust woman with kind eyes, welcomed them warmly, ushering Emma inside while her husband helped Xavier with the horses. The Millers had 3 children who watched Emma with curious eyes as their mother settled her in a rocking chair near the fire. "Xavier Blackwood," Sarah said, shaking her head fondly, "always bringing strays to my doorstep." "Mrs. Collins is heading to Willow Creek," Xavier explained, "to stay with her aunt." Sarah's expression turned sympathetic as she took in Emma's pallor. You're ill, child. Let me fix you some willow bark tea. It helps with the pain. Emma accepted gratefully, sipping the bitter brew while Xavier and Daniel Miller discussed cattle prices and weather predictions. The domestics seen the children playing quietly with wooden toys, Sarah mending by lamplight. The men's deep voices brought a lump to Emma's throat. This was the life she had imagined for herself before illness and abandonment had shattered her dreams. That night, lying in the Millers' spare room, Emma allowed herself to cry for the first time since Thomas had left. She muffled her sobs in the pillow, not wanting to disturb the household, but her grief felt too large to contain grief not just for her failed marriage but for the future that seemed increasingly uncertain. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Emma," Xavier's voice was low, "are you all right?" She hastily wiped her tears. "Yes, I'm fine." There was a pause. "You don't sound fine. Please, just go," she whispered, embarrassed at being caught in her weakness. Instead, she heard him slide down to sit with his back against her door. "My mother used to say that sorrow shared is sorrow halved," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to open the door. Just know that someone's listening if you want to talk." Emma stared at the door, conflicted. She had spent months handling her pain alone, building walls around her heart. The thought of lowering those defenses terrified her. "I'm scared," she admitted finally, her voice barely audible. "What if I never get better? What if Aunt Martha doesn't want the burden of a sick niece? What if I end up alone with nowhere to go?" "Then you'll find another way," Xavier replied, his deep voice steady through the wood, "and you won't be facing it alone. There are good people in this world, Emma, people who won't turn their backs when times get tough, like you." The question slipped out before she could stop it. "I made you a promise," he said simply. "I aim to keep it." They sat in silence for a long moment, separated by the door but somehow more connected than Emma had felt to anyone in months. "Thank you," she finally whispered, "for listening." "Get some rest," he replied. "We've got a full day's ride tomorrow." Emma listened to his footsteps retreat down the hallway, then settled back against her pillows. For the first time since falling ill, she felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Emma woke feeling rested, her pain momentarily dulled. Sarah Miller had packed them a generous basket of food and insisted on sending along a jar of her homemade liniment for Emma's pain. "Xavier knows how to use it," Sarah said, patting Emma's hand. "Don't be too proud to ask for help." They set out after breakfast, the countryside gradually changing as they rode. The dense forests gave way to rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, the peaks of mountains stood like sentinels against the sky. "We should reach Willow Creek by late afternoon," Xavier said as they stopped to rest the horses. "Your aunt's name is Martha." "Martha Holloway," Emma supplied. "Thomas and I lived in Denver for the past 3 years, but before that I grew up in St. Louis. My parents died of influenza when I was 16. Aunt Martha wrote offering to take me in, but by then I'd already met Thomas and we were planning to marry." Xavier nodded, processing this information. "And she lives in town. She owns a millinery shop, according to her letters." Emma smiled slightly. "I remember her visiting when I was small. She always wore the most beautiful hats." "Willow Creek's grown considerably in recent years," Xavier told her. "The railroad coming through changed everything. It's a proper town now with a doctor and everything." Emma's heart lifted at the mention of a doctor. Perhaps in Willow Creek she might find answers about her mysterious illness. As they continued their journey, Emma found herself studying Xavier when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength to him that she found increasingly attractive. Unlike Thomas, who had been full of grand talk and promises he rarely kept, Xavier seemed to be a man of few words but decisive action. "Tell me about your family," she said as they rode side by side through a meadow bursting with spring blossoms. Xavier adjusted his hat. "Not much to tell. My father was a rancher in Texas, lost everything in the war. Afterward, we moved west to start over, but he died of pneumonia that first hard winter. Ma raised me and my sister alone until I was 16, then she remarried. Good man, treated her well. They're in Oregon now, running a small horse farm. And your sister married a schoolteacher." They live in Santa Fe with their 4 children. A smile touched his lips. She writes me regularly, always asking when I'm going to settle down and give Ma some more grandchildren. Emma laughed softly. And what do you tell her? That I haven't found the right woman, he replied, his eyes meeting hers briefly before looking away. Or maybe I just haven't been in the right place at the right time. Something in his tone made Emma's cheeks warm, and she was grateful when a hawk soaring overhead gave her an excuse to change the subject. The first buildings of Willow Creek came into view in the late afternoon, just as Xavier had predicted. It was indeed larger than Emma had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, a church steeple visible above the rooftops, and the unmistakable signs of prosperity in the well-maintained buildings and busy streets. Martha's shop should be on Main Street, Emma said, anxiety suddenly gripping her. What if her aunt turned her away? What if the letter hadn't arrived? Xavier seemed to sense her worry. One step at a time, he said reassuringly. Let's find the shop first. Holloway's Millinery was a charming establishment with a large display window showcasing elegant hats adorned with feathers, ribbons, and artificial flowers. A bell tinkled as Xavier held the door for Emma, who entered with trepidation. A slender woman with silver-streaked auburn hair looked up from where she was arranging a hat on a stand. Her eyes widened. Emma, is that you? Emma nodded, suddenly too emotional to speak. Her aunt crossed the shop quickly and enfolded her in a gentle embrace that smelled of lavender and hat straw. My dear girl, I've been so worried. Your letter arrived last week, but it gave no date for your arrival. Martha held Emma at arm's length, her expression changing to concern as she took in her niece's pallor. You're ill? Yes, Emma admitted. That's part of why I'm here. Martha's gaze shifted to Xavier, who stood respectfully by the door. And who is this gentleman? Xavier Blackwood, madam, he said, removing his hat. I met your niece at Porter's trading post and offered to escort her to town. Martha's eyebrows rose slightly, but she smiled. Then I am deeply in your debt, Mr. Blackwood. Emma is the only family I have left in this world. It was my pleasure, Mrs. Holloway. The older woman turned back to Emma. You must be exhausted. I live above the shop, not spacious, but comfortable enough. Let's get you settled and then we can talk. Emma glanced at Xavier, suddenly reluctant to part ways. Mr. Blackwood has business in town. Perhaps he could join us for supper, as a thank you for his kindness. Martha smiled knowingly. Of course, will 7 o'clock suit you, Mr. Blackwood? Xavier nodded. That would be fine, madam. I'll see to the horses and find a room at the hotel. Nonsense, Martha declared. My neighbor, Mr. Peterson, has a room for rent above his barber shop. Much more reasonable than the hotel and only 2 doors down. Tell him I sent you. After Xavier had gone, Martha closed the shop early and helped Emma upstairs to her cozy apartment. While Emma bathed and changed into clean clothes borrowed from her aunt, Martha prepared tea and listened as Emma explained the events that had led her to Willow Creek. That Thomas Collins always did strike me as weak-willed, Martha said indignantly when Emma described her husband's departure. I never understood what you saw in him, but I held my tongue. You were young and in love. I was foolish, Emma said quietly. Martha patted her hand. We are all foolish in love at some point, my dear. The important thing is that you're here now and we're going to get you well. Doctor Harrison is an excellent physician trained back east. We'll consult him first thing tomorrow. Emma felt tears threatening again. I don't know how to thank you. Family takes care of family, Martha said firmly. Now tell me more about this cowboy of yours. He's not my cowboy, Emma protested, blushing. He's just been very kind. Martha's eyes twinkled. He's very handsome, and he looks at you like you hung the moon. Aunt Martha, he does not. I'm 62 years old, Emma. I know that look when I see it. Her expression softened. And I see the way you look at him too, Emma sighed. Even if there were feelings, I'm ill. I have nothing to offer a man like Xavier. Let's not borrow trouble, Martha advised. For now, let's focus on getting you well and settled. The rest will sort itself out in time. Xavier arrived promptly at 7, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt under his vest. He had brought a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he presented to Martha with a shy smile. Mr. Peterson mentioned you were fond of spring blooms, madam. Martha accepted them with delight. How thoughtful, and please call me Martha. Madam makes me feel ancient. Dinner was a pleasant affair. Martha was an excellent cook and an even better conversationalist, drawing out Xavier's dry humor and sharing stories of Willow Creek's colorful residents. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months, the persistent ache in her side temporarily forgotten in the warm atmosphere. As they lingered over coffee and apple pie, Martha asked Xavier about his plans. "I'm meeting with the railroad agent tomorrow morning," he explained. "After that, I need to head back to the ranch. My employer's expecting a report." Emma felt a pang of disappointment. Of course he was leaving. He had fulfilled his promise to see her safely to her aunt. She had no claim on his time or attention. "How long will you be in town?" Martha inquired innocently. "Just a day or two, depending on how the negotiations go." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you must join us for dinner again tomorrow, and perhaps you could escort Emma to her appointment with Dr. Harrison in the morning." "I normally close the shop for lunch, but tomorrow I have an important client coming." "Aunt Martha, I'm sure Mr. Blackwood has more important things to do," Emma began, embarrassed by her aunt's transparent matchmaking. "Not at all," Xavier said quickly. "I'd be happy to accompany you if you'd like." Their eyes met across the table, and Emma felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her illness. "Thank you," she said softly. "That would be nice." After Xavier had gone, promising to return at 9 the next morning, Martha began clearing the dishes with a satisfied smile. "He's a good man," she said. "Decent, honorable." "Yes," Emma agreed, unable to deny it, "but that doesn't change my situation." Martha fixed her with a stern look. "Emma Collins, you are more than your illness. Don't you forget that." Emma slept fitfully that night, her mind filled with conflicting emotions. Part of her was terrified of what the doctor might say, while another part dared to hope for a diagnosis and cure. And underlying it all was her growing attraction to Xavier, an attraction she feared was doomed before it could even begin. Morning arrived with a light rain pattering against the windows. Emma dressed carefully in one of her aunt's altered dresses, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Martha fussed over her hair, arranging it in a becoming style before declaring her presentable. Xavier arrived exactly at 9, his hat in his hands and a concerned expression on his face when he noticed Emma's pallor. "Bad night?" he asked quietly as they walked toward the doctor's office, sharing an umbrella he had borrowed from Mr. Peterson. Emma nodded. The pain was worse. "And I was nervous about today." His hand briefly covered hers where it rested on his arm. "Whatever the doctor says, you'll face it with courage. I've seen enough of you to know that much." Dr. Harrison's office was a tidy building near the center of town. The physician himself was younger than Emma had expected, with intelligent eyes and a reassuring manner. He listened carefully as Emma described her symptoms, asking pointed questions about the progression of her illness. "I'll need to examine you, Mrs. Collins," he said finally. "Mr. Blackwood, if you wouldn't mind waiting outside." Xavier nodded, giving Emma's hand a quick squeeze before leaving the room. The examination was thorough but gentle, Dr. Harrison's expression revealing nothing as he palpated her abdomen and sighed. "You can get dressed now," he said when he had finished. "Then we'll talk." Emma's hands trembled as she fastened the buttons on her dress. Was her condition fatal? Would she spend her remaining days as an invalid, dependent on her aunt's charity, when she emerged from behind the screen? Dr. Harrison was writing in a ledger. He gestured for her to sit. "Would you like Mr. Blackwood present for our discussion?" he asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." Xavier entered looking as anxious as Emma felt. He took the chair beside her, his solid presence a comfort. "Mrs. Collins, based on your symptoms and my examination, I believe you're suffering from a condition called biliary colic, essentially gallstones," Dr. Harrison explained. "The good news is that it's not fatal. The pain you're experiencing comes when the stones block the bile duct. Can it be cured?" Emma asked, hardly daring to hope. "In severe cases, surgery is an option, though it carries risks," the doctor said. However, I don't believe your case has progressed to that point yet. I'd like to try a more conservative approach, first dietary changes primarily. Avoiding fatty foods can reduce the frequency and severity of attacks. He wrote out detailed instructions, along with a prescription for pain medication stronger than the laudanum she had been using. This should help with the acute episodes, he said, handing her the paper. I'd like to see you again in 2 weeks to assess your progress. Emma felt lightheaded with relief, not fatal, manageable, perhaps even curable. Thank you, doctor, she said fervently. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp but navigable. Emma turned to Xavier, unable to contain her smile. Did you hear? It's not fatal, just gallstones. Xavier's face broke into a wide grin, and before Emma realized what was happening, he had lifted her off her feet in a spontaneous embrace. He set her down almost immediately, looking embarrassed. Forgive me, he said. That was inappropriate. I'm very happy for you, Emma, she laughed, too elated to be offended. I feel like I've been given a new lease on life. They walked back toward Martha's shop, discussing the doctor's recommendations. Xavier listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about the dietary changes she would need to make. My meeting with the railroad agent isn't until 2 o'clock, he said as they approached the millinery. Would you like to celebrate your good news with lunch at the hotel restaurant? I hear they make an excellent chicken soup, should be gentle enough for your condition. Emma hesitated only briefly. I'd like that very much. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Willow Creek, with tablecloths and real silverware. Xavier pulled out Emma's chair with old-fashioned courtesy and ordered for both of them chicken soup as promised, with fresh bread and tea. To your health, he said, raising his teacup in a toast. Emma smiled, touching her cup to his. And to new beginnings. Their conversation flowed easily, covering everything from books they had read to places they had visited. Xavier told her about his dreams of someday having his own ranch, while Emma shared stories of her childhood in St. Louis. What will you do now? Xavier asked as they lingered over dessert, a simple apple compote that the doctor would likely approve of. Will you stay with your aunt, for now? Emma replied. Martha has already insisted I make my home with her. Once I'm stronger, I'd like to help in the shop. I'm quite good with a needle. I used to make all my own clothes. Xavier nodded, looking pleased. It sounds like a good plan. Willow Creek is a fine town, growing all the time. There was something in his tone that made Emma look at him curiously. Will you come back this way? After you report to your employer, his eyes met hers, serious and intent. Would you like me to? Emma's heart beat faster. Yes, she admitted softly. I would. A slow smile spread across Xavier's face. Then I'll find a reason to return. The moment was interrupted by the town clock striking 2. Xavier reluctantly got to his feet. I should get to my meeting, he said. Will you be all right getting back to your aunt's? Of course, Emma assured him. It's only a short walk. He paid the bill and escorted her to the door of the restaurant. I'll see you for dinner tonight. We'll be expecting you, she replied. As she watched him walk toward the railroad office, Emma acknowledged the truth to herself. She was falling in love with Xavier Blackwood. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Was she setting herself up for another heartbreak? Or was her aunt right? Was Xavier different from Thomas in all the ways that mattered? That evening, Martha closed the shop early to prepare a special dinner that adhered to the doctor's dietary recommendations for Emma. When Xavier arrived, he brought a small package wrapped in brown paper. A get-well gift, he explained, handing it to Emma. Inside was a beautifully bound journal with cream-colored pages. The stationery store owner mentioned you might enjoy writing down your thoughts during your recovery, Xavier said, looking suddenly uncertain. If it's not to your taste, it's perfect, Emma interrupted, genuinely touched. Thank you, Xavier. Martha beamed approvingly as she ushered them to the table. Throughout dinner, Emma noticed her aunt creating opportunities for her and Xavier to speak privately, even inventing an excuse to leave the room for several minutes. Your aunt is not subtle, Xavier observed with amusement when Martha had gone to fetch dessert. Emma laughed softly. No, subtlety is not her strong suit. I apologize if it makes you uncomfortable. It doesn't, he assured her. I find it rather charming, actually. She loves you and wants you to be happy. And what about you? Emma asked, suddenly bold. What would make you happy, Xavier? His expression turned serious. Honestly, a home of my own, land, someone to share it with. His eyes held hers. Someone who sees the value in staying, even when times are hard, Emma's breath caught. That sounds like a fine dream. It's more than a dream, he said quietly. I've been saving for years. There's a parcel of land for sale just outside Willow Creek, good water, decent grazing. I looked at it this afternoon after my meeting. You're considering staying in Willow Creek. Emma couldn't keep the hope from her voice. I'm considering a lot of things, Xavier replied, his gaze never leaving hers. Including asking a certain lady if she might permit me to call on her properly once I've secured my future. Emma's heart raced. I think she would be very amenable to that idea. The moment was broken by Martha's return with an apple tart, but the connection between them remained, a tangible thing that filled the room with possibility. Later, as Xavier was preparing to leave, he asked Emma if she would walk with him to the edge of the block. Martha pretended not to notice their departure, busying herself with the dishes. The night air was cool, stars visible between scattered clouds. They walked slowly, neither in a hurry to end the evening. I'll be leaving tomorrow, Xavier said. Need to report back to my employer about the railroad negotiations. Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. How did the meeting go? Better than expected. We got the rates we wanted, and they're expanding the line to include a spur closer to the ranch. He paused, then added, I also spoke to the land agent about that property. He's holding it for me until I return with the deposit. You're really going to do it? Buy land here? Xavier stopped walking and turned to face her. Emma, I need to be honest with you. When I first offered to escort you to Willow Creek, it was because I couldn't bear the thought of someone ill traveling alone. But these past days with you, they've changed me. I've never met anyone like you, your strength, your kindness, despite everything you've been through. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Xavier, let me finish, he said gently. I know we've only known each other a short time. I know you're recovering from both illness and betrayal. I'm not asking for promises. All I'm asking is permission to come back, to see if what I feel, what I hope you feel too, might grow into something lasting. Emma reached up to touch his cheek, her heart overflowing. Yes, she whispered. Come back to me, Xavier. He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, the gesture both chaste and deeply intimate. 3 weeks, he promised. I'll be back in 3 weeks with my savings and my release from the Diamond Bar. I'll be here, she replied, getting stronger every day. He walked her back to Martha's door, where they said goodnight with proper restraint, though Emma could read the longing in his eyes that matched her own. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Following Dr. Harrison's regimen, Emma's health improved steadily. The episodes of pain grew less frequent, and her strength returned bit by bit. She began helping Martha in the shop, discovering a talent for trimming hats that delighted her aunt. You have an artist's eye, Martha declared. My customers are already asking specifically for hats trimmed by you. In the evenings, Emma wrote in the journal Xavier had given her, pouring out her hopes and fears, documenting her recovery, and exploring her growing feelings for the cowboy who had promised to return, true to his word. Exactly 3 weeks after his departure, Xavier rode into Willow Creek. Emma was arranging a display in the shop window when she spotted him dismounting outside. Her heart leapt as she hurried to the door. He looked different, somehow more settled, more determined. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her knees weak. You're here, she said, drinking in the sight of him. I told you I'd come back. His eyes moved over her face, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the brightness of her eyes. You look well. I am, she confirmed. Dr. Harrison says I'm making excellent progress. Martha appeared behind Emma, her expression delighted. Mr. Blackwood, what perfect timing. I was just closing for lunch. Perhaps you'd like to take my niece for a walk. The weather is lovely. Xavier grinned at the obvious matchmaking. I'd be honored if Emma is willing. Let me get my shawl, Emma said, already turning to fetch it. They walked toward the town square where a small park offered benches under shade trees. Xavier told her about his journey, about giving notice at the Diamond Bar, and about the land he had purchased that morning. "It's 30 acres to start," he explained. "Room enough for a modest herd and a good garden. There's a creek running through the western edge and a stand of timber for building." His expression grew serious. "There's no house yet, just a small cabin that needs work. It would be a humble beginning." Emma understood what he wasn't saying. "I've never needed luxury, Xavier. After these past months, I've learned that security and kindness are worth far more than material comforts." They reached a bench partially secluded by flowering bushes. Xavier guided her to sit, then lowered himself beside her, taking her hands in his. "Emma, I know this is fast. Too fast, perhaps, but I've lived enough years to recognize something rare and precious when I find it." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. "I'm asking if you might consider a future with me. Not right away. I want to court you properly, give you time to be certain, but I need to know if that's something you could want too." Emma's heart felt too full for her chest. "When Thomas left," she said slowly, "I thought I would never trust again. I believed his abandonment was a reflection of my worth, that I simply wasn't valuable enough to stay for." Xavier's hands tightened on hers. "He was wrong." "I know that now," Emma continued. "Because you showed me differently. You stayed when you had no obligation to. You cared when it brought you no advantage." She met his gaze squarely. "So yes, Xavier Blackwood, I can very much envision a future with you." The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over mountains. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, reverent kiss. When they parted, Emma couldn't help but smile. "Aunt Martha will be insufferably pleased with herself," Xavier laughed. "She deserves to be. I think she had us married off in her mind the moment I walked into her shop." They spent the afternoon walking the boundaries of Xavier's new property. The cabin was indeed small and in need of repair, but Emma could already envision curtains at the windows and a garden beside the door. "It will take work," Xavier cautioned as they stood looking at their potential future home. "And time." "We have both," Emma replied, her hand finding his. Over the next 2 months, Xavier courted Emma with attentive care. He took her on gentle rides as her strength increased, brought her wildflowers and books from the general store, and spent evenings on Martha's porch discussing their dreams for the future. Meanwhile, he worked tirelessly on the cabin, making it weathertight and comfortable, adding a second room and a proper stone chimney. Emma continued to improve under Dr. Harrison's care. The episodes of pain grew rare, and her energy returned fully. She and Martha expanded the millinery business, with Emma creating a line of simpler, more practical hats for the farmers' wives who couldn't afford Martha's more elaborate creations. On a golden afternoon in late summer, Xavier took Emma on a picnic by the creek that ran through his property, their property, as he had begun to think of it. The trees were just beginning to show hints of autumn color, and the air held the first crispness of the changing season. After they had eaten, Xavier suggested a walk along the creek. They strolled hand in hand until they reached a small clearing where wildflowers still bloomed despite the lateness of the season. There, Xavier stopped and turned to face her. "Emma Collins," he said, his voice deep with emotion, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. Every day with you confirms what I knew from the start, that you are the woman I've been waiting for all these years." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Dropping to one knee, he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said, "but everything I have and everything I am is yours if you want it. Will you marry me, Emma? Will you build a life with me on this land?" Tears filled Emma's eyes as she looked down at the man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness on a trading post porch. "Yes," she whispered, "with all my heart, yes." The wedding took place in October, a small affair in Willow Creek's white-steepled church. Martha had created a special hat for Emma to wear with her best dress, a confection of cream-colored silk with tiny pearls that matched her ring. The entire town turned out to celebrate, charmed by the romance of the cowboy who had stayed when illness had driven another man away, Dr. Harrison gave the bride away, while the Diamond Bar's owner stood as Xavier's best man. Even Mrs. Porter from the trading post made the journey to witness the union, bringing a quilt as a wedding gift. As they spoke their vows, Emma thought of how close she had come to giving up hope that spring day when pain had nearly unseated her from her horse. If she had turned back, if she had taken another route, if Xavier hadn't been sitting on that porch, so many chances for their paths never to have crossed. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Xavier's kiss was tender and promising, sealing a covenant that both believed would last a lifetime. The cabin had been transformed in preparation for Emma's arrival. Neighbors had helped Xavier add a proper bedroom and a cozy parlor. Martha had contributed curtains and linens, while the women of Willow Creek had organized a pounding to stock the pantry with staples. That night, as Emma stood in the doorway of what was now her home, she felt a sense of peace she had thought lost forever. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood," Xavier said, lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "I love the sound of that," she whispered against his neck. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Xavier's arms around her, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "When Thomas left," she said softly, "I thought it was the end of everything. I couldn't imagine that his cruelty would lead me to the greatest happiness I've ever known." Xavier's hand gently stroked her hair. "Some men don't understand the meaning of for better or worse. I'm grateful every day that he was fool enough to leave a treasure behind for me to find." The years that followed brought challenges, as all lives do, but also immeasurable joy. Emma's health continued to improve under Dr. Harrison's care, though she maintained the dietary habits that kept her condition manageable. The land prospered under Xavier's stewardship, the small herd growing steadily each year. Martha eventually sold her millinery shop and moved into a cottage Xavier built for her on their property, declaring that she had no intention of missing a moment of her grandchildren's lives. She didn't have long to wait. The following spring, Emma discovered she was expecting their first child. Elizabeth Martha Blackwood was born on a snowy December night, with her great-aunt and Dr. Harrison in attendance. Xavier paced the floor of the cabin until the infant's first cry rang out, then fell to his knees in gratitude when Dr. Harrison placed his daughter in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he brought the baby to Emma's side. "Just like her father," Emma replied, exhausted but radiant. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Daniel Xavier, and 3 years after that, another daughter, Sarah Grace. Their family was complete, their cup overflowing. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised Emma with a new journal, similar to the one he had given her during those first days in Willow Creek. "I thought you might want to start a fresh chapter," he said as they sat on the porch of their now expanded home, watching their children play in the yard with Martha. Emma leaned against his shoulder, content beyond measure. "Every day with you has been a fresh chapter, my love. Any regrets?" he asked, his arm tightening around her waist. She thought of the long road that had brought her here, the illness, the abandonment, the fear and uncertainty. Then she looked at her beautiful children, her beloved aunt, and the man who had kept his promise to stay, no matter what. "Not a single one," she replied, turning her face up for his kiss as the Colorado sunset painted the sky in shades of promise.